Most laser users cut their projects out of maple, walnut, or cherry. But today, I want to show you how you can elevate your creative and professional projects by creating your own beautiful, laser-ready plywood using exotic veneers and a few other techniques. Check these out. Now, before we begin, we need a few things. First, we need some veneer. And veneer is essentially a thin sheet of wood sliced from a log. I tend to buy my veneer in thin sheets like this, or even rolls. However, you can also purchase samples online from Amazon, and they literally come in hundreds of different varieties. Now, later in the video, we're going to create our own veneer by gluing up solid boards and then slicing them thin on the bandsaw. We're also going to need a sheet of MDF, and essentially we're going to glue our veneers onto that sheet. And in order to do that, we need some wood glue, a foam roller, wax paper, and a vacuum bag. Now, a vacuum bag makes this process a whole lot easier, but if you don't have a vacuum bag, well, clamps work just as well, and I'll show both methods. Now, I think the next step is to cut our veneer to the same size as our MDF sheet. So now that we cut our two thin sheets of veneer, it's time to glue them to our MDF. So take a little bit of wood glue. And then we're gonna roll it on to our MDF like that. Now you want a nice thin coat. You don't wanna go too heavy, but you also wanna make sure that you cover all of the surfaces. Great. One sheet like that. We'll flip it over and then do the same thing. Now you don't want to put glue on the veneer itself because it's going to fold up. You only want to put it on the MDF. Now that that's finished, let's wrap it in some wax paper before we place it into the vacuum bag. I usually tape it up a little bit too, just to sort of keep it all together. Okay, so now we're ready to place our glued up panel into the vacuum bag. So I'm going to take our piece and I'm going to place it onto the platen, which is a sheet of plywood underneath, but under the mesh. And the mesh will ensure that air can circulate throughout the bag. The mesh kind of looks like this stuff here. Now I'm going to close up our bag by using this pipe. And then I need to connect our hose. Add one end to the bag and the other to the pump. And then finally, going to plug in our pump. So as you can see, our vacuum pump sucked out all of the air out of our bag, allowing the weight of the atmosphere to bear down on our piece. Now this gives us even clamping pressure on the entire sheet. So we're gonna let this sit for an hour or two, and then we'll move on to the next step. Okay, so it's been about 2 hours, and now we're ready to take this out of the vacuum bag. Release some of that pressure. Take off our seal. Take it up. Okay, this looks perfect. Now I also wanted to show you that you can do the same thing using clamps. And then sometimes I like to clean up the edges using my table saw. And then we're going to lightly sand each side just to make sure we get rid of any glue marks that might be on the veneer. So now let's just add some clear coat to each side, and when that dries, we'll apply our paper masking. By the way, I'm selling a small batch of the plywood that I've been making on Etsy, so if you want some, go check it out. Now that our piece is finished, let's go ahead and make a puzzle. Before we dive into our next project, I want to talk about a couple of things. First, I'm using MDF as our substrate because it's a really stable material, meaning that it's less likely to cut or warp than solid wood. It also engraves nicely. We're also applying veneer to both sides of our substrate because if we only applied one sheet of veneer to one side, well, this might have a tendency to warp and cut. I also wanted to mention that you can experiment with a whole lot of different materials other than veneer. Check these two samples out. So these were made using fancy paper. And then this one here, this is book cover material. How cool is that? I've also glued veneer to colored acrylic, and that's interesting because when you cut it, well, you get a colored core. So I think the next project that we're going to create is a sign or a piece of wall art, and we're going to use some small batch ply as well as some 3M tape. So check this out. So this is the part of the video I'm most excited about. I want to show you how you can create laser-ready plywood that just looks awesome. So check out this piece right here. This is inspired by Michael Alm's pattern plywood. If you don't follow his channel, definitely check him out. You can also create larger pieces like this that looks like plaid. And in order to do this, I'm essentially creating a cutting board, right? This is just a solid piece of wood. And then I'm going to bring it over to the bandsaw and we're going to resaw a few sheets of thin veneer. We're then going to glue that veneer to our substrate, place them in the vacuum bag, and when that dries, I'll run them through the drum sander and then do the other side. So for this one, I think we're going to make a notebook. Let's go do that now. So we're going to start off by resawing our solid blocks. Cutting about a 16th inch veneer, anything thinner than that, well, becomes fragile. And just like all the other examples, we're going to glue it up, and then we're going to place it into the vacuum bag. And when that's done, we're going to bring our piece over to the drum sander. And we want to make a couple of passes until our veneer is paper thin. And now, we're going to glue up our other side. Now you might be asking, why not glue both veneers at the same time? And the reason for that is, well, we'd risk sanding through our veneers if one of our sides isn't exactly black. Hope that makes sense. Isn't that cool? It's just a notebook, but man, that looks expensive. It came out really nice. Now, before we go, I just want to show you one more project. Let's create a laser cut 4-string punk rock guitar. We'll start by cutting some hardwood and skateboard veneers. And then we'll glue them up to make a plank that looks like plaid. When that's finished, we'll use the bandsaw to resaw our blank. Now that we have our thin slice, let's glue it onto a skateboard veneer and place it into a vacuum bag. To make everything nice and smooth, let's run our piece through the drum sander. And now, using our Thunder laser, we can begin cutting our 20 skateboard flies. Alright, so far so good. Now we'll glue and clamp everything up, sand off the char, round over the edges, solder the electronics, and finally install our hardware.